Recently, I've been taking a look at a lot of handhelds, and I've gone back and started to collect different ones, and I've started to modify them to kind of bring them up to current times. Because if you go back and, for example, grab a Game Boy Color, you might like the form factor, the games you can play on it, the battery life, but of course, when the lights go out, the weakness of the system becomes pretty obvious. You can't see the screen. Now, of course, you can get little accessories like the worm arm, and you can modify it, and that's what I wanted to do today. I still think the Game Boy Advanced being backlit with a new screen is probably the best bang for your buck, and that is, if you're gonna get one, probably the system I would buy either pre-modified or modify your own, but I still wanted to take a look at the Game Boy Color, see what it looks like with the backlit screen, and hey, there are some people who still just like the Game Boy Color, whether it's through nostalgia or just genuinely the form factor, and I thought we'd take a look at how it looks with a new backlit screen, because there is a new kit that is out there. People have started to use it over the last, I would say, 7 or 8 months, and it's pretty cool because it takes that same screen that we used in the Game Boy Advance and kind of jams it into the Game Boy Color. And this is the Funny Playing Game Boy Color. It comes in this kind of neat case. Like, it's pretty solid, and this would of course be how it's shipped to you. So you open up the box, it's in like this plastic casing, and it has a bunch of foam in here as well to kind of, I guess, just keep the screen from being broken. So on the inside, you have some of this closed cell foam that is pretty nice. Has this 3M guide tape, and this sits inside of the Game Boy Color to help position the screen. And you can see the screen itself is right here. It's pretty large, right? Because it's also used, like I said, for the Game Boy Advance, but using this cable here with these chips, it will take the image from the Game Boy Color and pretty much section off a square from this screen so that it's activated and is more in line with what the Game Boy Color should look like. Which pretty much means we will get a really nice looking overall picture when we're playing the Game Boy Color, and it even has access to the top of the Game Boy Color where that infrared port is, where you touch it and it will change the brightness of the screen. So I'm pretty excited to check this one out. Now, you can find these screens on eBay and Amazon, and I will link to where I got this one from online. It took a little while to get to me, but the mail has been was kind of weird at the time over the last few months, so it might not take as long when things get more back to normal. The other thing I will mention about this screen is it takes quite a bit of modification because we're fitting a larger screen that's being repurposed for this form factor with this Game Boy Color, and technically the smaller screen, it's only going to use about 2/3 of that LCD that would normally be fully used in the Game Boy Advance. So rather than hack up an original translucent purple Game Boy Color shell, I went ahead and ordered just a standard purple shell that's new, so it's not an original one, but it still looks pretty much exactly the same. I didn't really want to tear up one of these originals. Now, these Game Boy Colors come apart very, very easily. If you saw last week's video where we went ahead and took apart a Game Boy Light, it is essentially the same idea. Some screws on the back, the shell comes up, and then you're looking right at the motherboard. It's one of the reasons I like these as a good way to kind of start modifying systems, because there's not a massive amount of disassembly and then reassembly. It's pretty easy. It's seriously like 8 or 9 screws and you're down to the screen. And with just a few screws at the bottom here unscrewed, and then we have our cable we have to unplug, we'll have the board completely out. Now, if you're going to be modifying your original shell, you would do some things to cut this up. I don't really need to do much else here because I even have new buttons, but I will need the little infrared port here. And I don't know if this case came with the power, but I'll take that as well. Otherwise, though, I'm good, and I'll just save all of this for another project or just as a backup shell. Now, the new shell I have here is solid purple. It's not clear, and I went ahead and grabbed this one online, and they're pretty much all over the place, like Amazon, eBay. I'll even link to one for you if you need some help finding them, and they have quite a few different colors and variations you can pick from. There are even like some Pokemon ones on there, so plenty of different things to choose from. This one comes with screws, buttons, and oh, and it does have the power rocker there as well, and a new D-pad and all that. And it also came with a new front jewel. This will peel off here, and it should be really clean looking. So we'll have a very nice looking screen overall when it's all done, which is great. I did pre-cut this. So if you look in here, there are guides online of where to cut, which is mostly just any of these brackets around it, because the screen has to sit kind of up and down like this. So it's gonna sit in here. And the idea then is you can't really have much of the plastic around the top of this D-pad getting in the way, or any of this plastic. Now, there is that 3M tape that's gonna act as a guide for where this sits in, but it will allow it to kind of sit steady, and then the board, of course, on top will also help to hold it. First thing though, I do want to test the screen just to make sure everything works okay and it wasn't damaged in transit, but I do have to insulate the back. I'm just gonna use some Kapton tape to kind of insulate it, which is just tape that'll make it so that it doesn't short the board out when it touches it. I think this was supposed to come with something to do that, but it's not here, so not a big deal. You can also use some packing tape. That will work as well. And like I said, the idea is just to keep it from touching the board that's gonna be behind it so it doesn't short anything out. And there we go. I don't think this crease right here is gonna do much because it's not like super high up or anything. I think we should be okay there. We'll test it and see how all that goes, but this should be pretty straightforward because you don't have to solder anything. We plug in this cable to the top of the board and then it connects right to the bottom of this screen. It's really easy. All right, so with the cable plugged in here, then it runs down, connects there. We should be able to turn this on and test it. I put a couple of AA's in the Game Boy Color underneath here in the bottom shell, power this on, and hopefully we get a there it is, look at that. Oh, that looks good too. And this should change the bright, yep. So this is just, this is actually just responding to the touch, and it's kind of neat. How many different brightness settings is that? That is bright. That is really bright. Let's see, there is at its dimmest, and then it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so it has 5 different brightness settings, stepping up from this being the dimmest to very, very bright, but it is a nice looking picture though. That's awesome. So I decided to add some Kapton tape to this as well, since it looked like it was gonna be running into the board on this side, so I figured we might as well insulate that as well. But now it should flip over and sit right on top here. We're just gonna have to line it up, and that might be a whole thing on its own, we'll see. And then this will route around right by the infrared sensor. The idea is we'll just touch that infrared sensor part on the top and it'll change the brightness of the screen. So almost every guide that I looked at for this part, which is lining up the screen, essentially is just, hey, good luck. It's gonna be trial and error. I'm gonna be putting the screen down, seeing if it looks all right, and then double checking over and over. So here goes. We're gonna start with our guide here, which is a 3M cutout sticker that should hold the screen in place and help to line it up. Okay, first shot, I'm off by a little bit. It's kind of down and to the right here diagonally, so I have to move it up that way. Okay, I think I'm to a point where I'm pretty much satisfied with where it is. It's not like 100% perfect, but it has a black border around all sides here and it's completely visible. So I think I'm good with what I have here. And for anyone wondering where I have the screen aligned for that, I just pushed it all the way up into the top right with a little bit of space left for where the infrared piece is gonna go. I did have to trim down the IR port a little bit on the bottom here so it would fit in with this screen. It's a tight fit all the way around for the screen to go in here, so even things like that do have to be kind of cut down, but it should fit fine. The D-pad had to be cut down a little bit as well, not the original one, but the new one that I grabbed, I cut that down so the screen would fit in there, but otherwise, I think we're good and I can start putting it back together. So here's an interesting revelation I made when I was trying to put it back together. We are so pressed for space with this screen, I had to try to remove all these little spikes for the cartridge connector. Yeah, I had to go through and cut each individual one because they're sticking out just a little bit and putting pressure on the back of the screen, making it very difficult to close. So with just a little bit of space kind of made here, that should make it easier to close up. Well, it's all screwed together. It was a pretty tight fit overall, like I said, but let's see. I haven't put the front jewel on yet. We'll see how it looks here. Look at that. That looks pretty good. And we have, of course, the infrared sensor here that will change how bright the screen is. It goes through several stages. I think I counted 5 of them earlier. That right there, that looks really good. All right, I cleaned the screen off pretty well. We'll stick this guy down. It's already sticky on one side there. And we'll just peel it off here. So it's back together now. Got the new front on. Let's pop a game in. First though, let's double check. Yeah, it looks good. The screen is just a little bit down, slightly. It's nothing too bad because you can see all the way around the screen, not a big deal. But let's go ahead and drop in Zelda, of course, DX. This has the extra color options on it, so it should give us a decent, oh, look at that. That looks great. Have the speaker going there. Oh, like that just pops so well off the Game Boy Color. It's because this is the same screen that's used in the Game Boy Advance SP, so like the Game Boy Advance modification that we would use this screen for, it's gonna look like that, right? But of course it's in the form factor of the Game Boy Color. And a lot of people like kind of the aspect ratio of this anyway. And if you like the form factor of the typical Game Boy Color over like the Advanced or the SP, this is gonna work really well. I mean, the colors just pop off this screen. And of course we have different brightness options here. So like that's really, really bright. The camera's having a harder time picking it up. That looks really good. And then if we go all the way down to the bottom, I guess the dimmest, it still looks pretty good, but I think like right in the middle, something like right there is probably the best bet. I don't know what the effect is on the battery life. I'm thinking it wouldn't be too bad. But it should lower it somewhat. But this is so worth it with how good it looks. And I figured some of you big Pokemon fans would want to see how something like, what's this, Pokemon Yellow would look. Looks great, right? This is just such a cool modification. It just makes the Game Boy Color so much better. After playing the Game Boy Color for a few hours with the screen installed, I noticed some noise on the right side, and that seems to be something that others are talking about as a drawback to this modification. I might look into fixing it, but it's not easy to spot when playing the game, and my go-to is still the Game Boy Advance handheld I modded anyway. Which brings me to the question of, do I recommend this modification to anyone out there looking for a backlit screen to play Game Boy games with? And unfortunately, I would say this particular mod isn't the easiest to suggest over something like the Game Boy Advance mod that will play the same games. The big advantage for the Game Boy Color modification is it doesn't require soldering, but the amount of cutting and case modification to fit a screen that doesn't fit at all into the shell is a bit too much versus other installs. I think if someone created a shell that was already set up with brackets to align the screen, removing the guesswork and cutting, it would be a lot easier to tell you to spend the $50 on this screen and spend the hours or so installing it. As it stands now, this is more of a really cool project to do for Game Boy Color diehards, and I would suggest anyone else look to modify a Game Boy Advanced instead. But with that being said, I really like what the retro community has been able to do with these newer IPS screens in older handhelds, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for improvements around installation.